Good morning. So today we're talking about Anabaptist identity. Could you identify an Anabaptist? Have any of you ever seen an Anabaptist before? Raise your hand if you've seen an Anabaptist. Have you ever met a Mennonite? Raise your hand. Have you ever met? Who's met a Mennonite here? Okay, a couple of you have met Mennonites before. That's good. Well, this is a Mennonite church, and Mennonites are a kind of Anabaptism. And one of the things about Anabaptist and Mennonite identity that's different from almost all other people, some other people are similar, but is that Anabaptists and Mennonites are pacifists and believe that it's really heroic to avoid violence and prevent wars. And most people believe that one of the most heroic things you can do is become a war hero and help your country that way. So this is part of Mennonite identity, and my father-in-law tells a story that tells about his tradition, his identity, because it's a story of something that happened to his pastor, who probably dedicated him as a baby from his church. Then his pastor's name was B.W. Harder, and a long time ago, B.W. was fixing the roof of his chicken house on his farm, and this neighbor came by, and this neighbor was very angry at him because there was a war going on. It was World War I, and lots of American soldiers were dying in Europe, and this neighbor thought that B.W. was not patriotic because he didn't go to war, and he spoke the enemy's language, German, and he didn't want to buy war bonds, and so he came to the farm and he threatened B.W. and he said, "B.W., you got to put up an American flag. You got to show some patriotism. You are a traitor to this country." And B.W. thought, well, you know, this neighbor's kind of a blowhard. He didn't think too much of it, and the neighbor left. But the neighbor then went on to this rally for soldiers in a nearby town of Whitewater. And at this rally, there was a whole bunch of veterans and soldiers' families, and they were talking about the war. And the neighbor got up and he said, "You know, there's a lot of Mennonites out there, and they speak German. That's the language of the enemy. The enemy speaks German, and the Mennonites speak German. The Mennonites aren't sending any of their boys off to fight in the war. They're not buying war bonds to help support the war. We got to go out there and teach them a lesson. They don't even fly the American flag." So about 25 cars loaded up with people, cars and trucks, and they drove out to B.W.'s farm. And one of the men from the crowd went up to B.W. with a flag and thrust it at B.W. and said, "Here, B.W., you put this flag on your house right now." Well, B.W. had his tools out because he had been fixing the roof of the chicken house. So he nailed that flag up on the porch right there in the front of his house. And B.W. asked the mob, because they were angry, and they were red, and they were grumbling, and some people were yelling at him. He asked them, "Well, should I leave this up all the time?" And they said, "Yeah, you keep it up all the time. We want to see that every time we come by here. You better keep it up, or you'll be sorry." And B.W. said, "Well, shouldn't I take it down at night?" No, you keep that up all the time, because you're really supposed to take it down at night. But the crowd was angry. They didn't want any excuses. They wanted him to leave it up, even though it was actually, you're not supposed to leave it up at night. Well, the crowd was still very angry, and B.W. was worried. He was scared because some Mennonites had been tarred and feathered for being pacifists and being against the war. That meant that mobs like the one in B.W.'s yard, parked all over his grass and running into his flowers and stuff, that mobs like that had gone to people and tarred and feathered them. They put boiling hot tar on their skin that blistered their skin and covered them with feathers to hurt and humiliate them. And he was afraid that his family would get hurt. So he suggested that they celebrate this occasion by singing a patriotic song. So he started singing "America the Beautiful." "Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain." And the crowd, well, They were a patriotic group. They'd been singing songs at the rally, so they joined in and they started singing the song with him. And they sang through the first verse, and then BW started the second verse. Oh, beautiful for pilgrims' feet, for stern, impassioned stress. Well, not so many people remembered the second verse. There were some hard words in there. And so a lot of people just started humming along. And then BW went into the third verse and the fourth verse, and he was the only one singing on the third and fourth verse. Nobody else knew the words at all. And the crowd got very quiet. And slowly, one by one, they went back to their cars and trucks and loaded up and drove away. And BW never heard anything more about it. But this story is something that Opawibi tells our kids because it's part of our tradition and our identity. And the church where BW was pastor for perhaps longer than any other pastor at that church, they probably don't tell this story anymore because they've really been losing their Mennonite identity. They discuss whether they want to still keep the word Mennonite on the church anymore because they don't believe that war is necessarily bad anymore. A lot of the church supported the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War, and as their beliefs change, their identity changes. So it's really what you believe that determines your identity, and it's important to know both. Thank you.